You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 12th of August 2024 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead, the Middle East is on a hair trigger, with the expectation that Iran may launch a large-scale attack on Israel in the coming days. We'll have analysis on the situation. Then Pakistan's former spy chief has been arrested. Is this yet another way to persecute the jailed former leader Imran Khan? Plus,
no innovation, no creative thinking, just hard work and great people around. We've got iron people in railways, we've got iron people in defense industry, and that's the key, that's the secret behind it.
We'll hear from Ukraine's defense industry chief and have a flick through the world's papers. We'll check in on the progress of Indonesia's mega project, the new capital, Nusantara. Then there'll be a roundup of architecture and design news. And finally, we'll find out more about a US company which plans to reintroduce supersonic flight within the next 5 years. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. Ukraine said on Monday its biggest cross-border assault of the war had captured 1,000 square kilometres of Russia's Kursk region. US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump had a friendly 2-hour interview with billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk on Musk's social media platform X after technical problems delayed the start of the event for more than 40 minutes. And a study released yesterday gives evidence of liquid water far below the surface of Mars and shows how the planet's surface had lakes, rivers and oceans more than 3 billion years ago. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards are holding military drills in the western parts of the country, close to the border with Iraq. An official said this was to enhance combat readiness and vigilance, but the timing is relevant, as the operation is taking place after Iran vowed to retaliate against Israel following the killing of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh on July the 31st in Tehran. In reaction, the US has accelerated military deployment to the region, and the UK, France and Germany have said there must be no further delay in agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza and called on Iran and its allies to refrain from attacks against Israel that would further escalate tensions. Well, I'm joined now by Sanam Vakil, who is the director of the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House. Hello, Sanam. Really good to have you back on the programme. The fear is that Iran is preparing for a large-scale attack, but it's been so careful to distance itself until recently, working through proxies. Was the killing of Haniyeh a red line, and do you believe that Iran will go ahead with actions that really could have global consequences?
Good morning, Georgina. Well, I think the red lines have been crossed quite a few times over the past number of months with the war in Gaza underway. Iran has seen Israel strike its Damascus consular facilities in April. That led to direct strikes between Iran and Israel, and that was really unprecedented for both sides to strike in each other's territory. So I think that was really a turning point. The killing of Haniyeh on its own is embarrassing for Iran because it took place inside Tehran within an IRGC security compound. So it shows the extent of Israel's reach, a massive security breach that Iran is defining as a breach of Iran's sovereignty, and that's why it needs to respond. This also came on the back of a number of targeted assassinations against Hezbollah's Fuad Shukur was killed in Beirut.
Sanam, do we still have you with us? Sorry, you're just cutting out.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're just cutting out slightly. I wonder if you could tell us what we know about these military drills.
The drills that have been underway perhaps were already scheduled and are part of Iran's regular preparedness in advance of ongoing strikes, or perhaps preparing for retaliation from Israel. But at the same time, there's a psychology here in holding drills while sort of dragging out the Iranian response. It creates anticipation across the region.
Tell us more about the US response. What hardware and manpower do they have in the region?
The U.S., of course, is moving assets into the region, moving ships and moving its equipment into the region to show that it is standing firmly behind Israel and that it will not tolerate an acceleration. And in fact, the U.S. is going to play a central role, as it did in April. Well, of course, U.S. CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, in April played a coordinating role, and it brought together Arab countries like Jordan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia in coordinating a response to stop and halt the drones and missiles that were coming from Tehran. It is likely that a coordinated response is being planned as well for this time, but we just won't really know anything until the operation has launched and we see the targets and the assets used, and of course the impact, as well as to understand who else has been involved. I think that the Arab states, if I may, are being quite cautious. They are very concerned of a broader regional escalation, and that's why you have seen widespread Arab mediation, including from the Jordanian foreign minister, and widespread Arab condemnation of the killing of Hania in Tehran.
So Joe Biden presented plans for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and I wonder if those specific plans are still on the table and what the latest is in the ceasefire negotiations, and if a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas would prevent an all-out Iranian attack.
Well, their ceasefire talks are meant to recommence on April 15th. The U.S. has again gathered all the parties together, from Hamas to Israel, with Egypt and Qatar being important mediators. And the general commitment from Iran and the axis of resistance, including Hezbollah, as well as the Houthis in Yemen, has been that if a ceasefire is achieved, then all of this escalation and violence will stop. The problem here is, of course, that with the assassination of Hania in Tehran, his replacement is, in fact, Hamas's military leader, Yahya Sinwar, who is besieged in Gaza and is known to be quite hardline. And the expectation is that his timeline for a ceasefire might not be aligning with that of the U.S., let alone the rest of the region.
So what do you think the timeline is?
Well, I think that Hania's assassination and then Yahya Sinwar stepping up into this political role really signifies that Hamas has nothing to lose right now. It's shown that it has survived the 10th month of this very brutal war that continues to see a massive loss of Palestinian life. And Hamas has yet to receive commitments from Israel that a ceasefire will lead to a permanent end to this war. And that's what they're holding out for, alongside, of course, the release of key Palestinian prisoners, perhaps including Marwan Barghouti, longtime sort of symbolic leader of the Palestinian cause that has been in jail in Israel for decades now. So, we could be at this for much longer than most of the region, if not most of the West, wants.
And how is Israel preparing in case of a large-scale attack from Iran?
Well, Israel has its forces on high alert. And it has been on high alert, actually, for almost 2 weeks now, while it's been sort of waiting. Israel, of course, has very strong air defenses, the Iron Dome, alongside others. And, of course, it has been coordinating with U.S. Central Command to anticipate and prepare for what might be coming from Iran.
So Kamala Harris has used much stronger rhetoric against Israeli attacks on Gaza than Joe Biden, most recently about the strike on a school, which has also been condemned by the EU, Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I wonder if there's any clarity on what happened, because Israel and Hamas are presenting competing narratives about this.
Georgina, it's very hard to say. What is really clear is that there's continued very brazen breach of humanitarian law, targeting a school and children in this way is really crude, and it sort of reflects, again, the very different sort of timelines between Israel and the West as well, and the fact that the West hasn't been able to really constrain or pressure Israel to change course, and perhaps to even acknowledge that all of this killing, particularly of young people, is, of course, hugely damaging Israel's reputation as well as its domestic cohesion.
And finally, I wonder if either Israel or Iran have the resources and the personnel for this fight, and if it does go ahead, what the global consequences might be.
Well, I think first we have to see what Iran does and how Iran does it. And if it is attacking infrastructure and seeks to minimize impact, similarly to what it did in April when it struck Israel, that could lead to a very sort of telegraphed, calibrated attack. And then Israel would equally perhaps calibrate its response. There's no certainty that this is going to lead to the wider regional war that everyone has been fearing. But of course, should that transpire, obviously the United States could get drawn in. And this could have a broader impact on regional stability, involve civilian populations across the Middle East, including Iran and Israel. And of course, this will impact the global economy. Finally, you could see movement in oil prices and spread, obviously, to the open seas in the region.
Sanam, thank you very much indeed. That's Sanam Vakil from Chatham House there. This is The Globalist. It's 11:12 in Islamabad, 7:12 here in London. Pakistan's military has announced the arrest of retired General Faiz Hamid, who's the former head of the powerful Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, that's ISI. Well, I'm joined now by Binash Javid, who is a journalist at Deutsche Welle. Bina, many thanks for coming on the show. I wonder if you'd start by telling us more about Faiz Hamid and the importance of his former role at the top of ISI.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify, I'm basically a freelance journalist. Coming to your question, ISI is one of Pakistan's most influential and powerful institutions. And this is the first time in Pakistan's history that a former head of the spy agency is facing court-martial. So the military basically says that General Hamid abused power. He abused power. He acted illegally. General Hamid, the former spy agency head, he and his brother have been accused of basically attempting to acquire ownership of a housing development. They're accused of arresting and blackmailing the owner. But most importantly, he's also accused of violating the Pakistan Army Act after he retired in 2022. And this act prohibits the military officials from engaging in any sort of political activities for at least 2 years after the retirement.
And how important was his former role at the head of ISI?
His role is quite controversial. He's seen as somebody who has plunged Pakistan into a deep political crisis. And Pakistan has not been able to recover from that crisis. So General Hamid, the Pakistani observers say that he was very close to the jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan, and General Hamid did play a role in bringing Imran Khan to power. He was also very ambitious himself. He's also known as somebody who during the role of former Prime Minister Imran Khan was a part of a crackdown on his political opponents and also on media. So his role stays quite controversial. Many in Pakistan see that this latest ruling by the Pakistani military that they are going to he's in custody and that he will face court martial is basically, of course, the military is saying that there is accountability and we will hold anybody responsible, even if they were in a powerful position. But many in Pakistan see it as a part of a crackdown against allies of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. So it over, like on black and white, yes, the military accuses him of corruption and of political meddling, but it is a part of a wider war that's going on in Pakistan between the military and especially between Imran Khan, the former prime minister, and the repercussions and the consequences we see every day in Pakistan.
So we know that Khan's initial conviction was suspended. He was acquitted in several other cases, but he still remains behind bars. He's been there for a year. Reports say Islamabad plans to keep him there until 2029. Clearly, the military and the current government feel he's a threat. Is there some sense then that Hamid was perhaps some kind of proxy for him on the outside, or that the two might have been planning to wrest back power, or is this just straight revenge?
As I've said, that it is basically seen as a crackdown against allies of Imran Khan. And one of the accusations that he faces is that he was involved in political meddling even after his retirement. When Imran Khan was in power, and after we know that he was through a vote of no confidence, he was ousted in April 2022. And after that, we see that he had a huge street power. He was protesting, and he publicly accused Pakistan's military of conspiring with his political opponents to oust him from the power. And there are some political observers in Pakistan who say that Imran Khan at that time was getting support from some quarters within the military, and that General Hamid played a critical role in that. So these are all. Of course, there is no evidence, but this is what many political analysts in Pakistan believe. And so he was, even though Imran Khan is in jail, even now he's in jail, but then there are many influencers or supporters of Imran Khan that are pushing the case of Imran Khan at the international level. And then there are accusations that General Hamid maybe was involved behind this lobbying and advocacy for Imran Khan.
You talked about Khan's street appeal, the fact that people do go out publicly to support him. I wonder if there's been any public reaction to Hamid's arrest, and indeed if we know when he'll be sentenced.
So we are talking about a situation in a country which is mired in a very in a chronic, I would say, economic crisis, political crisis. Supporters of Imran Khan have faced, many say, a very hard crackdown. Many of them are still in jail. Of course, the military accused them of, especially I'm talking about the incident of May 9th, last year when the supporters of Imran Khan had stormed military installations. The military accused Imran Khan, the supporters of Imran Khan and the protesters, of directly attacking the military. Imran Khan has denied, and his party has denied those allegations. So it all started from there, and I still think that Imran Khan, even though he's in jail, he still enjoys support from the masses. Imran Khan is the one who I would say was the first leader in Pakistan's history that was able to mobilize so many people against the most powerful institution in Pakistan, the military. We have not seen this kind of resentment in Pakistani people. But I would argue that there is a certain fear now, and I don't expect people. I mean, there are protests happening in some parts of Pakistan, for example, in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, supporting Imran Khan. But because there have been people who were jailed for months, and they faced a lot of many people lost many months of their lives, their careers, their jobs, and I do think that there is a sense of fear, and I don't immediately see widespread protests happening. But in Pakistan, it's very difficult to say what will happen. You never know. Things keep changing. Many times in Pakistan's history, leaders who were ousted returned to power. Leaders once we thought that would never come to power again, they come to power again. So there is certain dissatisfaction in the society. People are unhappy with the 2024 election. In February, many in Pakistan see that those elections were rigged, were rigged so that Imran Khan's political future basically ends. But then again, in 2018, when Imran Khan came into power, there were widespread accusations that it was the military that brought Imran Khan into power. And General Hamid at that time also faced accusations that it was this guy, this powerful person who helped bring Imran Khan into power. So it's very, very difficult to say what will happen, but I can definitely say that there is a sense of dissatisfaction and frustration among Pakistani people right now.
Binish Javid, thank you very much indeed. Still to come on the programme. Remember that supersonic boom? Is supersonic travel about to make a comeback? Well, this is The Globalist.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
Well, let's continue now with today's newspapers. And joining me in the studio is Claudine Fry, who's a partner at Control Risk. Good morning to you, Claudine.
Good morning.
Let's start with Venezuela. The Guardian has a big piece here about what the opposition leader is saying there. And it's really a very dire situation. A lot of people watching what's going on have said they have never seen violations like this previously.
Yeah, that's right. I picked the story about the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, calling for protests this coming Saturday, the 17th of August, in the wake of presidential elections that took place in July, which have been widely seen as a sham. She is calling for protests to condemn the conduct and outcome of the election and to rally support among opposition forces to continue campaigning against the reign of President Maduro, who is now entering his second decade in power, a period of time which has seen the national economy in Venezuela crumble to pieces and levels of repression intensify. And we've seen that particularly happen just in the last few weeks since the election took place. The article in The Guardian details, actually quite chillingly, the nature of an operation that is underway, being pursued by the military and security forces, which apparently is nicknamed Operation Knock Knock in its English translation, which refers quite literally to the way that security forces are knocking on the doors of people perceived as a threat to the president and then essentially disappearing people. So Machado herself has made this call for protests in hiding. No one actually knows where she is currently, which tells the story itself.
Absolutely. And of course, the opposition say that they do have proof that the election was rigged.
That's right. The Supreme Court at the weekend declared that it was accepting the results as reported by the election authorities and the president. But the opposition says that it can demonstrate that actually its candidate, someone called Edmundo Gonzalez, Machado herself having actually been banned from standing, actually secured about double the amount of votes as President Maduro, but that is being contested by the president.
Let's move to the New York Times now, and we're talking about 47,000 deaths in Europe last year caused by heat.
That's right. This is a New York Times piece that, like many other papers over the past day or so, has been reporting on a new piece of research published in Nature about the impact of heat. Europe is reportedly the part of the world where heat is increasing most dramatically. And yes, indeed, the number of deaths that heat is causing now is really quite startling. In 2023, which was the hottest year on record, although this year, 2024, is likely to beat that, 47,000 people are believed to have died of heat in Europe, although that's a figure that's actually quite difficult to identify because heat is not generally identified on a death certificate as a cause of death. But I wanted to highlight this piece because actually one of the other aspects of the research reported in Nature is perhaps less bleak than that headline figure about fatalities might suggest. It's actually reporting on the adaptation, the way that we are evolving as societies to cope with heat and the impact that is having, which is actually on quite effective. In fact, if we hadn't adapted in the way that we have over the last 20 years, the number of deaths that we've seen by heat over the past year or so would have been about 80% higher than it actually was.
That's extraordinary. Very, very distressing story now about Afghanistan's Taliban rulers. The fact that actually they are being more and more accepted, but that means that the rest of the world is saying it's fine how they treat women.
Yes, it is depressing. Here we are, 3 weeks almost to the day. It'll be the anniversary on Thursday of the Taliban returning to power in Afghanistan. And although the country is not officially recognised internationally, it is supposedly a pariah state. And that is, yes, in large part because of the way the Taliban administration treats women. In reality, yes, as you suggest, Georgina, it is creeping back into legitimacy. There are a number of countries, particularly in the region surrounding Afghanistan, but also in the Middle East, which are engaging with the Taliban administration. And indeed, the UN itself agreed to let the Taliban attend talks in Qatar earlier this summer about how to sort of get Afghanistan back into the international diplomatic environment. And it agreed to allow the Taliban to attend, even though the Taliban refused to allow civil society groups or women to attend those talks.
Which is extraordinary. So the UN essentially bowing to their demand that no women would be present there.
It does seem staggering that the UN agreed to this. And I think it is an indication of a sort of pragmatism that is creeping into the way that the international community is engaging with Afghanistan. And I think that is partly because of the security situation in Afghanistan. This is a country which remains incredibly fragile and where there is a danger of instability spreading. And there is a terrorism threat in Europe now, which is heightened and which is linked in part to the ISK group, a serious Islamist extremist group which has a presence in Afghanistan.
Finally, let's have a look at travel, because according to the FT, there are fewer business trips happening by plane.
Yes, this is according to a sort of business travel industry association, which suggests that as sort of attitudes to travel and work have changed post-pandemic, but CEOs are no longer taking day trips. And apparently they're citing frustrations with disruption, concerns about the environment, and sort of different attitudes to work-life balance as being the reason behind this drop in the number of day trips being undertaken. But actually, I think one of the things this article doesn't mention is the fact that many short-haul flights have never got going again after the pandemic. So it may also be a reflection of the fact that schedules are no longer as convenient. But I think the fact that, in fact, as the article says, the amount of money being spent on corporate travel is going to hit a record this year suggests that our concerns about the environment are not yet trumping our desire to travel and sort of be able to overcome the benefits of a face-to-face meeting.
Claudine, thank you very much indeed. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Ukraine said on Monday its biggest cross-border assault of the war had captured 1,000 square kilometres of Russia's Kursk region, and that Russian President Vladimir Putin would have to be forced into making peace. Putin said Ukraine had received help from its Western masters and vowed that the enemy will certainly receive a worthy response. US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump sat down on Monday for a friendly 2-hour interview with billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk on Musk's social media platform X, after technical problems delayed the start of the event for more than 40 minutes. The two men exchanged praise repeatedly, with the Tesla chief lauding Trump for his bravery during the attempt on his life last month, and Trump congratulating Musk for his willingness to fire workers demanding better conditions. And a study released yesterday using data from NASA's Mars InSight lander shows evidence of liquid water far below the surface of the fourth planet, advancing the search for life there and showing what might have happened to Mars's ancient oceans. Water's considered essential for life, and geological studies show the planet's surface had lakes, rivers and oceans more than 3 billion years ago. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. While much of Ukraine's war effort continues to rely on deliveries from foreign partners, the country's defence industry is experiencing a resurgence in growth. Last week, the country's chief defence enterprise, Ukроборонпром, entered the world's top 50 defence companies for the first time. In July, it was reported that Ukraine now produces more howitzers per month than any other European country. Monocle's Julia Lassica sat down with Ukraine's Minister for Strategic Industries, Alexander Kamyshin, to ask about the importance of the defence industry for the country and hear why he thinks arms will become Ukraine's chief export to the world when the war is over. Julia started by asking him about the current state of Ukraine's military stock.
Year one of this war, of the Great War, we faced with what we had in stock and what we've got from our partners. At the beginning, it was just javelins and Bayraktars, but later everything arrived. And the first year, we've been fighting with what we had in the stock and what we've got from the partners. Year two of this war, I've got an assignment from my president to start production. Now you can see how much we produce. Starting from drones, finishing with missiles. Starting with land systems, finishing with air systems. And you can see quite many items of weapon and ammunition and systems produced in Ukraine in Kursk operation. I must say that the capabilities we have now with reaching deep inside Russia, long before we've got any allowance from our partners, we've been doing that with made in Ukraine weapon. Everything appeared last year, end of last year.
Thank you. And you came from Ukrzaliznytsia, where you were sort of praised for your innovative thinking, the kind of flexible way that you approached what was happening on the ground in Ukraine. How have you brought that innovative thinking, that sort of drive, that energy to this role today?
No innovation, no creative thinking, just hard work and great people around. We've got iron people in railways, we've got iron people in defense industry, and that's the key, that's the secret behind it. Defense industry people are the second toughest people in my country after the army. These people are under constant fire several times a week, working 24/7, doing in 1 month what other nations are doing in years, and some nations are doing never. And these people are real miracle. That's the magnet for other nations' industries that start coming to Ukraine. They see the value in creativity, in hardworking people in Ukraine, the engineers, the army of engineers. And this army is making the difference now and showing the delivery, giving the delivery.
And I wanted to ask about those Western partners that you have, because obviously there have been quite a few. Rheinmetall is just one of them. Quite a few talking about and beginning operations of building actual factories on the ground. How has that process come about so quickly? Because for Western partners, it was seen as an escalation to create a military presence in Ukraine of this sort. How have you managed to do this? Can you talk to me about this development?
By the moment my president was asking for permission from other nations to hit inside Russia with a weapon we received from our partners, by that moment we've been already firing inside Russia with made in Ukraine systems for quite a while. Same with the factories, Western industries start opening in my country. We showed that we can keep running under shell, under fire. And that was a good reason for them to start local presence. Sometimes it's just rep office, sometimes it's R&D, sometimes it's assembly, sometimes it's real production. But finally, the one that starts being on the ground, they always expand their presence. They see the value for themselves. We offer them the B2B level, the B2B value that is bringing value back to their companies, to their nations. That's why it's quite natural that they start local presence in Ukraine.
And I guess it's a preparation for them as well in terms of testing out weapons, testing out different experiments.
It's not only about testing the weapon. If we started ourselves as the testing field range for other nations' weapon, now we switch to building up ourselves as the arsenal of the free world, as the place where you can produce it, you can improve it, you can modernize it, you can make it better. The way we fight now is quite different from the way we have been fighting a year ago or 2 years ago. And your systems should be adapting as well. The drones we used a year ago are quite different from those ones we use now. And that's why we are constantly trying to improve the systems we have, and our partners as well. They see the value in that.
And can you tell me about drones specifically? Because, I mean, today there was the news that an FPV drone knocked down a Russian helicopter, in Kursk on Russian territory. So this is huge, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. But can you tell me about the specific developments with drones? Also, you have sea drones, you have all sorts of different types of contraptions.
Maybe you've seen the sea drone that was firing a missile on the helicopter as well. It happened several months ago. And drone, like all types of unmanned systems, they were not invented in Ukraine. They've been invented years ago and used in other operations, but the way we use them and the way we scale up production of those systems is Ukrainian miracle. And I'm sure that that's the oil of Ukraine. That's the export product of Ukraine. That's something that we'll share back to our strategic partners after we finish this war with the victory of Ukraine. And the way we moved Russian fleet out of Crimea and now down to the sea, to the bottom of the sea, with mosquito fleet of sea drones, that definitely would be a special chapter in a big book about this war.
So you see Ukraine's future as a sort of fortress and a kind of Israeli type of, is that how you see, because you're talking about the export?
You can call it the Israel of Europe. You can call it whatever you can call it. And the final point is that Russia will not get out of this land. They will remain our neighbors, and we should be always ready to fight them back. For that reason, we have to learn how we can produce enough to fight them back. For that reason, we will be always a good member in NATO. We would be always a good member in European defense industry framework, because we will come with capabilities. And we will come with capabilities other nations don't have enough. We don't come with the complicated, expensive systems like fighter jets, but we come with those things we learned how to do out of necessity, like small and cheap FPV drones, long-range deep strikers, and land systems. Trust me, you will learn more about unmanned land systems in the nearest year. You will see the change it will make on the front line. And that's still untold story. And it will happen. We already have capabilities to produce enough. Now it's the point to learn how to use them in the proper way and send more of those unmanned systems to the front line and get more soldiers far from the front line, out of the front line. We're gonna save our people. We fight for saving our people.
Alexander Kamyshin there, Ukraine's Minister for Strategic Industries, speaking with Monocle's Julia Lassica in Kyiv. You're with Monocle Radio. (13:39 in Jakarta, 8:39 in Zurich. In 2022, Indonesian President Joko Widodo announced he would be relocating the capital, Jakarta, to a new city, Nusantara. The futuristic green project is carved out of the jungles of Borneo, and Widodo's already held his first cabinet meeting there. The only problem is, it isn't finished. Well, joining me now is Ben Bland, who's the director of the Asia Pacific programme at Chatham House. Good morning to you, Ben.
Good morning.
Why was it decided to move the capital away from Jakarta?
There are a number of reasons, but chiefly, according to Jokowi, Indonesia's president, it was about protecting Indonesia's future, given that Jakarta is a sprawling megacity of tens of millions of people. It's literally sinking into the sea because of land incursion. It's really overcrowded, terrible traffic jams. So the first reason he said was about making a safe, bright, shiny, sustainable new capital city. That's the ostensible reason. It was also about shifting the center of development in Indonesia away from Jakarta and the island of Java, the world's most populated island, where something like 60% of Indonesia's economic activity is based. So moving the capital to Borneo is about projecting a more even plan for Indonesia's future development. And I think perhaps the most important part is about Jokowi's legacy. So he's now served 2 terms as president, and his focus throughout his time has been about building physical infrastructure, airports, roads, bridges, and laying the groundwork and kind of the image and the pathway for a more developed Indonesia. And I think Jokowi views this new capital city, still in its very early stages, as the final piece in the puzzle of his legacy as a developmental president.
So tell us about the grand vision then for this new city.
There's a few elements to it. It's meant to be a smart and sustainable green city. That's a key part of it. So that's about having public spaces, having space for cycling, for walking, something that you wouldn't get in Jakarta or most other Indonesian major cities. It's about sustainable construction in theory, although in the practice, I think is much harder to achieve. And it's meant to be, as I said, about sharing development more equally. The challenge, of course, is you can't move a megacity of 30 million people somewhere else. So, they can build a new capital city where they can base civil servants, eventually some businesses, some foreign embassies, etc. But it's going to be, even in 10, 20, 30 years' time, it'll be a city on a much, much smaller scale than Jakarta. So you can move some of the functions of Jakarta to Nusantara, but you can't actually move the capital city or all the people who live there. So I think there are a lot of challenges still to achieve this grand vision that Jokowi has. The other part of it is the symbolism. So they've already built the shell of the new presidential palace in the shape of a Garuda, a mythical bird of Indonesian legend. And a lot of it is about projecting this image of Indonesia as a country, a developing country that's been through a tough period, but finally arriving on the global stage. But I think it remains to be seen whether that vision can be filled out, because if you only have a few grand buildings, but you don't get the bulk of necessary sort of center of gravity of population moving there, if things don't work there and it takes a long time to build a new city, I think it will look more like a broken dream than a grand vision for Indonesia's future.
So what stage is it at, and what are the challenges that they've faced along the way? I mean, having a cabinet meeting when it's not finished, and of course coming up is the Independence Day celebration. That's happening in less than a week, and I wonder what stage the city is at in able to host those ceremonies.
It's still in its early phase. To be fair, it's gone reasonably well for such a large construction project. You're always going to expect very big delays. They're building this new capital 1,000 over kilometers away from Jakarta on a different island. So everything has to be flown in effectively from other parts of Indonesia. It's in an area that was formerly a bit of rainforest and degraded forest land. So they have to clear all that. So they've made reasonable progress in the time they've had. However, there's still not that much there. There's some apartments, there's a presidential palace, they've built sort of reservoirs and roads and other things. So it's coming along, but the cabinet meeting was really symbolic. It's about sending a message to Indonesians and to investors in Indonesia and overseas that this project is really going to happen, while Indonesia is going to get a new president, Prabowo Subianto, in October. He'll take over. It's about trying to reassure people this project is going to carry on. But it's still at the very early stages, so they're capable to hold a cabinet meeting there, hold a celebration here or there. But it's not really a livable city yet. They say they're going to move a few civil servants from the end of this year, but they've also acknowledged that it's going to be quite a few years until it really starts to be a livable, even if small city. The challenge, really, main one is about investment. So they've said they need more than $30 billion to build this really ambitious project, and they only have about 20% of that coming from the state coffers. They need to attract $25 billion of private investment into this project, which really only exists on paper and a few shells of buildings and roads. And that's going to be really hard. They did break ground on a few hotel projects backed by Indonesian investors yesterday, but attracting the kind of capital they need is very tough. Lots of people have signed MOUs and said they're keen to support this and see how it goes, but pouring, hundreds of millions of dollars into the ground in the middle of nowhere is another challenge. And I think it's obviously a difficult investment climate right now globally. There's also finally a degree of uncertainty. While Prabowo Subianto, who will take over, he was elected earlier this year, take over in October, he's vowed to continue the project. It's not his personal project, it's Jokowi's project. And there's a question mark over how seriously and how committed he will be to this project, which is in the end is going to burnish someone else's legacy rather than his. So I think we'll have to see what moves he makes in his first couple of years. I think that will determine how seriously foreign investors and others take the plans in the coming years. And without that external money, the project won't really happen on the scale that it was intended to.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. That was Ben Bland, Director of the Asia Pacific Programme at Chatham House. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
It's time now to talk architecture and design with Tim Abrams, who's contributing editor to the Architectural Record. Tim, many thanks for joining me. Can we start by discussing the Osaka World Expo 2025? Now, that's held from the 13th of April to the 13th of October next year, but one architect in particular is making waves. Tell us more.
Good morning. Yes, the Osaka Expo, as the Olympics finish, it's the World Expo that's being looked forward to as the next big global event, culture and commerce rather than culture and sport. Osaka is an important historical moment in the evolution of the Expo movement. There was a large expo held there in 1970 when Fumihiko Maki, Kenzo Tang, and Isha Kurokawa, the architects of Japanese post-war movement, created this big event. Now we're seeing it go back to Osaka, and it's the architect Kengo Kuma who is putting his stamp on this one. Kuma himself went to the 1970 Expo and was appalled and disappointed by the architecture he saw there and went in a very different way. So it's Kuma's turn. He is designing the Qatari National Pavilion. And he's also, strangely for a Japanese architect, also designing the National Pavilion of Portugal. The master plan's being done by another architect, but it's Kuma who's making who's putting his stamp on the event, and not to the pleasure of the Portuguese architects who feel that perhaps reasonably it should be a Portuguese architect who designs the Portuguese pavilion. But it looks like it's going to be, in terms of its visual appeal, Kuma is really going to be the architect that's dominating it with natural materials. The Qatari pavilion is intended to look like traditional Qatari boat, a dhow with sails, this white material sails and wood. And the Portuguese pavilion is going to be strongly aquatic themed as well, nautically themed, with a pavilion made from nets and reconstituted shipping material. So yeah, it's Kuma's show in 2025.
Now, above those country pavilions will fly their national flags, and we're currently in a situation where historic symbols are seen as embarrassing or out of step with modern fashion. Tell us more about a popular backlash and response to flags being too boring.
Indeed, in November, the inhabitants of Maine, the state in the United States, will be able not just to vote for the new president, they will also be voting for a new flag of their state. The existing one is, and to use a vexillographic, that's a flag design term, is a seal on a bedspread, which is the unpolite term for a traditional flag, which is basically the bureaucratic insignia of the state just stuck on a sheet and waved above the state capitol. The way in which Maine would like it to go is to be something more funky, something more groovy. I love that they're going from a picture of a lumberjack and a sailor to a more stylized representation of the state with a beautiful tree and a star in the corner. It's already been designed. There is calls for it to be brought back when the state had its centenary in 2020, and when they saw the old flag, they thought, actually, that one looks much nicer, much groovier, much more representative of Maine today. This comes off the back of Minnesota getting rid of theirs because it had a Native American apparently being chased off his land on there. Not exactly the image for a modern-looking part of America. Mississippi got rid of theirs in a few years ago because it had a kind of Confederate element. Whilst there's been that historical kind of let's get rid of the things which we don't really want to see, that's created a general tendency across the United States for their flag of their state to be looked at, and a lot of them are now changing, with Maine being the most obvious and attractive example. In the background, obviously, internationally, flags are changing all the time. Mauritania got a new flag in 2017, a couple of red stripes added. Malawi has changed its flag back and forth depending how pan-African its leadership is. So there's always a little bit of a flux. But in America at the moment, you're definitely seeing a movement away from, shall we say, awkward or difficult or problematic representations to more abstract, positive, natural symbols which represent a place.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. That's Tim Abrams. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. "20 years after the demise of Concorde, it is possible that supersonic flight might return. The American aerospace company Boom Supersonic is developing an airliner which could halve travel times on transatlantic trips, and is confident that there will be a market for it when it begins commercial service within the next 5 years. Well, Modo Morrison is the head of strategic content at Flight Global and joins me now. Modo, it's lovely to have you back. Remind us why the Concorde was retired.
Well, Concorde was retired really for two reasons. One, the most fundamental reason, it just never made money. Part of the reason for that was the sonic boom. It could only fly over the ocean. It couldn't travel at supersonic speed over land, which massively limited its markets. And it had also got to an age where Airbus, who sort of inherited the program, was no longer able to or willing to support it. So its only two customers, British Airways and Air France, retired it in 2003.
And of course, there was that terrible crash in Paris.
There was a terrible crash as well, of course, yes, which didn't help its sort of reputation. I don't think that in itself would have been a problem had Concorde continued. It was really more to do with that there was just no one was going to buy any more Concordes. They were not going to build any more. So the decision had been taken long before 2003 that Concorde wasn't viable.
So what can you tell us about this company, Boom Supersonic?
So Boom have been around since for 10 years now. They came up with this idea in 2014. There were other supersonic companies trying to build supersonic aircraft. They've kind of fallen by the wayside. Boom is the only one left. They are proposing a sort of 60 to 80 all business class aircraft. They believe that they can sell up to 1,000 planes. Now, of course, if everyone's paying business class fares, that arguably makes the a sort of viable product. But they do face huge challenges. One of those, probably the biggest one, is that they all the big engine manufacturers, Rolls-Royce, GE, Pratt & Whitney, have all said they are not going to work with them to build an engine. So Boom are, with some small partners, trying to design, develop and manufacture their own engine, which is just a huge task and almost unsurmountable. But they are, they insist they can do it. They insist that they're going to have a working engine ready by the end of next year. And then, if everything goes to plan, people could possibly be flying on this aircraft by the end of the decade. But I really do think I hate to be skeptical and cynical about new developments, exciting new developments in aerospace, but this really is one that sadly I just cannot see getting off the ground, if you'll pardon.
Why have Rolls-Royce and the other big engine makers refused to have any part of it?
Well, Rolls-Royce, of course, were part. Rolls-Royce and Snecma of France were the two companies that paired up to make the Concorde engine. So they've all, and of course, GE, Pratt & Whitney make military engines that are supersonic for supersonic fighters. So they've all got the technological prowess, and I guess they've just taken the decision that there are better ways to spend their R&D dollars. It's a very, very expensive proposition, and they just think that they've obviously taken the decision that there's not a business case for this aircraft, and it's not somewhere that they want to go. Rolls-Royce for a while had worked with Boom and sort of loosely partnered with them on some studies, and then last year they pulled out and said they weren't going to take it any further.
What about increased environmental damage with supersonic flight?
Well, indeed, yes, and this is yet another challenge that they face. Now, Boom make a huge thing about being highly sustainable. They're going to be using sustainable aviation fuel. Well, yes, so is everyone else. In theory, there isn't just very much of it about, and it's very expensive. The fact is that a supersonic engine, a supersonic jet, will be less environmentally friendly than a subsonic jet. It will burn more fuel relatively to make the same distance, the same journey. So, again, that's a very, very difficult message to get across. Now, what they'll argue is that, speed matters. There are enough people around the world that will pay to have their journey times halved on routes like, London to New York or Tokyo to Seattle. That creates the market, and a lot of these people perhaps aren't that bothered about the sustainability aspects of travel. They quite often use business jets to get from A to B. So I think while they will make a big sort of case about it being so sustainable, the fact is it's not particularly compared to the rest of aviation, and I don't think the market that they're aiming for will be that bothered.
Murdo, thank you very much indeed. That's Murdo Morrison there. And that's a story we're going to be following with some interest. Supersonic flight possibly making its return. That's all we have for you on today's show. Thanks to our producers Vincent McAviney, Carlotta Rebello and Christy O'Grady. Our researcher was Sana Jumani, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons, with editing assistance from Jack Dewars. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and the briefing is live at midday in London, and the Globalist will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.